Folks, Zaide here, back for another episode of DramaQuest. This time, the drama will be strictly fictional as we talk about the history of Kunark. And of course, talking about Kunark, I had to bring you the master of Kunark lore, none other than LevelUpLarry as our co-host today. Larry, I love your shirt. What's going on, man?
Hey, it seems like, we got the memo because this is totally coincidental. But yours
Right.
looks much better than mine does. Mine's gone through a couple of washes here. Yours looks nice and bright, man.
I never wash my EverQuest clothes because real people don't see me in it.
That's, yeah. I did not get that memo, but yes.
Does Rare Loot still make new stuff? I haven't seen them in a while.
They do. Yeah, as a matter of fact, I don't know if they're producing like new stuff, but certainly the website's still active. I still direct people to the site, and I mean, I guess there may or may not be a shameless plug there, but let's just say that there's still a discount code out there that works. Yeah, in my mind, they're still very much active.
Hey, if you shoot me your affiliate link, I'll throw it in the description of this. If people want to get these sweet EverQuest t-shirts, you can barely see mine, but whatever. So Larry, just in case anyone is living under a rock out there and they don't know, you're a big streamer, big YouTube content creator, ultra high quality content, like the production value out of this world, 10 million times better than me or pretty much any other EQ streamer out there. Plug your stuff really quick. Where can people find you?
Hey, too kind, man. And I appreciate the kind words. So, like Zaide said, I'm Twitch and YouTube, LevelUpLarry. That is that. You can catch me on both of those platforms, kind of sporadically these days, but trying to fight the good fight out there by restoring and archiving some sort of lore paper trail, so to speak. Just like Zaide's trying to do. And so you'll find a lot of lore videos on the YouTube, and then on Twitch whenever I go live, typically will find me playing some classic EverQuest. So that's me.
It felt like there was like this weird period, right? Like EverQuest came out, everyone was hyped. There's tons of content in the style of 1999 to 2002 content, like weird, like web pages with black backgrounds and red text. You know what I mean?
Oh yeah.
And then it all kind of went away. And when it came to like video stuff, like YouTube came out, EverQuest wasn't really a big thing on that forever. And I feel like over time we've lost a lot of the lore that was around from those old days.
I totally agree. And, it's pretty telling when you can probably count on maybe one hand, maybe two, but on one hand, the amount of creators out there that have, kind of taken on the task of trying to dig in deeper into the lore of EverQuest, connect the dots with the many plot holes and gaps that there are in the lore, especially classic EverQuest lore, like you were saying, 99 to 2002. And so, it certainly hasn't been a very popular topic on YouTube at the beginning, but I will say, and I'm sure you can agree, is that there seems to have been like a resurgence, so to speak. And I can, of course, you can account that to Project 1999 and the plethora of other classic inspired EverQuest servers and efforts, even, live, just TLP servers and whatnot, just kind of bringing back the interest of, what is the EverQuest lore? And then they come to find out, like, oh, there's not a lot out there. Okay, well, hey, maybe I'll take it on and, try to get something out there. So yeah, I think there's been a couple of content creators out there that have tried to take that on, and I'm it's amazing. It's awesome. I'm glad that we're seeing that resurgence happening.
Yeah, it's important. I like it. I love your stuff. This all happened because somebody asked me to do like the next series. So we were doing like Permafrost and Miracle and stuff like that. Someone was like, "Hey, you should do Kunark next," and I was like, "I would love to do Kunark, but there's like no value in it because Larry already did like 3+ videos on Kunark, and I feel like they really covered the history of Kunark perfectly."
Yeah, but yeah, go ahead.
But then I delved into the world of the Wayback Machine. You know what I mean? And I started trying to find those weird posts from 1999. And I still think that you have pretty much done the job, but I feel like we found little tidbits to sprinkle on top so that we'll have some fresh content here for folks.
Yeah, absolutely. And, what not a better, I guess, lore time frame than that is, Kunark. It is incredible. It is rich with lore. I mean, I had a 3-part series about it, and honestly, I had to cut it down from 5, if not potentially more. So yeah, there's a lot of good, rich lore that comes out of Kunark, and like you were saying, there's still more. There's little tidbits that I didn't cover in my 3-part series that hopefully we'll get to touch on with just our discussion here today.
Yeah, and just so everyone knows, everything we're talking about today is pretty much right off the top. And that's what we're gonna do. We're gonna see where we go.
Right.
But
see where we go.
Larry, let's jump in. I guess like the place to start is probably with the Shissar, unless there's something earlier that is relevant for Kunark.
No, it's a great place to start because it's basically the only place to start as it pertains to Kunark history. There's no, to my knowledge, there is no recorded history before the Shissar. So the Shissar, for those who aren't familiar, intelligent race of snake men who inhabited the continent of Kunark since the beginning of time. And they were super intelligent, super powerful, and they took an interest in the Iksars pretty quickly, like on day one.
Yeah.
And it wasn't in a good way. They enslaved the Iksars right off the bat, which that of course sets the stage in an interesting way for the Iksar, because they are starting with just turmoil and oppression and just nothing good. But that's the Shissar, and the thing about the Shissar is that I think we'll probably sprinkle in some lore here and there, but just to kind of connect those dots, those lore dots. But Chelsith is what their capital city was, which is essentially the over there, that as many of us know it today. So that whole zone of over there was just the capital of these snake men. So that's where it begins, though, the Shissar.
I think of the Shissar and the Iksar relationship as basically like generational trauma and abuse. You know what I mean? Like the Iksar were oppressed, and then as soon as they experienced freedom, they're like, okay, they did the only thing they knew, which was to oppress everything around them, right?
Yeah, it was a little ironic, but that's precisely it. That's exactly what happened.
It's kind of weird because they have the same creator. They're both from Khazak-Thul.
Mm-hmm.
But the Shissar always seemed to me like the number one thing I associate with Shissar is arrogance.
Yes, very arrogant, to a fault. Some would say that would be their fatal flaws, their arrogance and hubris. So, and that's you'll find as those of us who delve into lore, and you realize that hubris can get you in trouble in the world of Norath.
Oh, yeah.
happens a couple different times out there, but yeah, the Shissar weren't immune to the punishment of that whole situation.
Now, in the world, the Shissar existed at the same time as the Relosian Empire. The pre-curse ogres, goblins, orcs, all those folks, the giants.
Yep.
So it's kind of interesting that there was never a major conflict. I read some lore that they encountered each other and opted not to go to war for mutually assured destruction kind of reasons. It seems odd to me because like the Ryle Sathir creatures usually are like, we ball, right? Like we're going hard no matter what.
Oh yeah, right.
But I think the Relosians like traveled pretty much across the globe conquering territory, and the Shissar were more like exploring other planes of existence and exploring the power of magic in general. And they were content to kind of just stay in Chelsith there, or stay on Kunark at least.
Yeah, and if I were to speculate, I mean, I'd have to think it was a mutual respect, thing that was going on between the ogres and the Relosian Empire and the Shissarian Empire, whatever you want to call it.
Right.
Had to have been, like, hey, okay, yeah, y'all are doing some things over here. We're gonna go back to our own devices and conquer other things that are gonna be a lot easier. But yeah, you're right though. The Shissar, they were being fueled by, they wanted that loot. They wanted that loot, that knowledge. It was just an addiction for them, and they just couldn't stop. It was never enough. And so, it started to get out of hand after some time, but,
and then they eventually, meet their downfall. Can you talk about that a little bit?
Yeah. So eventually, when you get so powerful that you're drawing the attention of not only your creator, but there's multiple gods that were like, yeah, what are these snake people doing down there? They're getting, not only are they getting a little powerful, but then they're not even relying on us. And of course, from the perspective of Kazakh, it's like, yo, I created you, and now you think that you're more than me, you're better than me. So yeah, Kazakh wasn't about that. And so, cue in the green mist, which put a stop to that whole thing at rapid speed. And so, green mist is, I guess it's kind of like a magic, a curse, done by Kazakh, but it essentially melts these snake people. And I think if I recall correctly, the only one that got away, well, there was a couple of them, and they were all in this temple, and basically evacing. Emperor Shrestha was basically performing evac.
How do you pronounce the name?
I
just say Straja. I'm sure it's wrong.
That's probably closer to the actual how it's pronounced. I've never figured it out. But yeah, him and a few of his close friends, they were able to get out in time. But that was that. I mean, that was effectively the end of the reign of the Shissar. And of course, what an opportunity for the Iksar at that point.
Have you messed around in Lucklin, like in content much? I know you're big in P99.
Yeah, and the answer is no, not nearly as much as I would have liked back in the day.
You've seen, like, I guess the temple, right, that exists in Lucklin,
and like familiar, yes.
So they transport it there, and they then create a vacuum in space because they're like, they are so deeply scarred by the green mist. You know what I mean? That it becomes like part of their culture. Like there's a vacuum so that like air can't get to them because now they can't get harmed by the green mist. But the undoing of the Shissar on Lucklin is that you find strange green metal and you use it to forge weapons. And those are the only weapons that can harm the emperor. Right.
Got it.
It's always, you look at the strange green metal, right? And it's like from mines below the temple, and then you look at the over there, and there's this huge winding gorge, right? You know what I mean? And I have always assumed the temple sat on top of that, and when they used their magic to transport to Lucklin, they brought some of literally the earth with them, or the ground beneath them was brought up in the transportation, and inadvertently brought some terrain that was touched by the green mist, and so that terrain, had that same property, and they brought with them their own undoing.
That's fascinating. See, I love it. I absolutely love it.
Yeah. So that was always my theory. I don't think it's confirmed anywhere at all, but it just sort of makes sense with that terrain feature. It
makes a lot of sense to me. Yeah, that it totally does. Yeah. Yep.
And then if you ever raid Sra Temple, there's a mob in the basement that you can unlock by killing all the taskmasters called Vizdra the Cursed.
Okay.
So basically what they did was, this was a cursed Shissar wizard, and she was imprisoned in the void, which is kind of the same place that I think Zabuxaruk is imprisoned, like Pop Stuff kind of thing. Mm-hmm. But they imprisoned her in the void. And the reason she was imprisoned was because the emperor was becoming afraid of her because she was getting really popular. Why was she getting popular? Because she was the wizard who transported them to Lucklin. She saved the Shissar race.
Gotcha. Okay.
And because he was jealous of that and everything, boom, they take them up there. And my last piece on the Shissar, I love the Shissar. Last piece on the Shissar here. I think that they actually succeeded in killing a god, a demigod. Okay. Yeah, that's my guess. Because if you kill Emperor, he can drop the Sword of Shraja. And if you cast Identify on it, it says it's the Shrajan Sword of Godslaying. And it has Bane damage extra planar.
Oh.
I think that was what triggered. I think they were traveling through planar rifts into other planes, and they killed some like really low tier god that we don't even really hear about. How long before, the time that we played the game. And that was the triggering point where Kazakh was like, no.
Right, hold up.
Yeah.
Yeah, no, I mean that's it makes a lot of sense. And you know, it's one of those things, just broadly speaking, where I feel like I kind of missed that opportunity to kind of, you know, figure out some of those pieces of lore, because I never really played Luckland. Even if I did, I mean, you know, even if I was deep into it back in the day, probably wouldn't have made, you know, put two and two together. But now, you know, now that I've gotten much more into the lore of EverQuest, particularly Kunark, and you know, so as the opportunities present themselves for me to jump into Luckland, I'm telling you
Project
what, it's going to be. I'm telling you, I'm gonna be all in on the rating for the first time ever in Luckland, and I'm gonna be paying attention to those lore. I'm gonna be reading logs while I'm trying to complete heal people. You know, there's yeah, I'm gonna be
the coolest thing about Shroud Temple in game is there's like hieroglyphs all around it that show images of the story of the Shissar, and you can kind of like piece it all together.
See, that's awesome. Yeah, that's great.
But so, you know, after they're pretty much out of the picture, pretty much over, like literally overnight, right? The Iksar kind of are the next preeminent race on the continent, notwithstanding the Ring of Scale, who are kind of doing their own thing. I think the ring is there at this point, not positive.
Yeah, I think so too. But yeah.
But like some of the Iksar were able to assist the Shissar if they were like really intelligent, right? They brought them in to like assist with some of the rituals and stuff, right? So there was already sort of like a little background of magic with the Iksar, and then they broke into like tribes, right? There's 5 tribes.
That's right. Shoot, let's see here. Kunzar, that's Venril's tribe.
Yep.
You have Nathar,
the big bad tribe.
The big bad tribe, that's right. Nathar, Obulus, Kailong, Jarsath, I think is.
Yeah,
dang, the 5. Dude. I get them? Oh, yeah, man.
Nice. Just got to remember the VP key.
Yeah, that's an easy way of doing it for sure. But you did have the 5 tribes, and yeah, this was over the course of, gosh, I don't know, it's a couple hundred years, where things were just kind of getting sorted out with the Iksar, and they're trying to find their place and didn't really have any leader. So yeah, they had, you know, the different tribes and all that. And of course, you know, you needed somebody to finally step up and lead them. And I think that's where our main protagonist of the Kunark lore story comes in. Venril Sathir.
Did you read about the book, The Unholy Writ of War? Have you seen that?
Yeah, that was Kotiz.
Yeah,
and Zabuxaruk had a little deal with each other.
So the Zabuxaruk thing is like a retcon, I'm pretty sure.
Okay. Yeah,
right. So, but I think Kotiz, isn't that the Iksar guild for necromancers too? The Brood of Kotiz.
It is.
So he was like one of the original great necromancers. I think it's implied that Kotiz like literally was one of those dudes who was assisting the Shissar, and
could have been.
As a consequence, when they died, he was like, let me grab some of the stuff here.
Yeah, don't mind me. I'll see myself out here, but I'm taking things.
Yeah. So there are 2 plot lines we hear about with Venril Sathir and how he gets the Unholy Writ of War. One of them, the modern one, is that he finds Kotiz is talking to Zabuxaruk, and Zabuxaruk says, hey, if you sacrifice 50 souls to me, I will give you this Unholy Writ of War, my book of war. And right as he's done and he's about to get the book, Venril comes up behind him and gets him and takes the book instead. But the original one from the Wayback Machine on the SOE website, talking about the Age of Snake, says that he found the hidden library of the necromancer Kotiz. He would come to open a large book, like a human's, like a man-sized book, which opened into a small room, like a bank vault kind of thing. Climbing into the book, he finds another book floating in the air. The Unholy Writ of War is its title, made of Iksar skins and containing great knowledge of combat. Made of Iksar skins implies to me that it was a Shissar book, especially since Kotiz was already taking a bunch of Shissar artifacts. And it was only later that they added the Zabuxaruk thing. Of course, I don't think Zabuxaruk was really too much conceived of even at that point.
Right. Yeah, I would agree with you on that.
My headcanon, the way I reconcile it, is like maybe Zabuxaruk actually made the pact with the Shissar. That's why they were able to travel the plains. and do all the things that they did. And then the Iksar just gained this book, blah, blah, blah.
Right. No, it's plausible for sure. And this book, obviously, I mean, it'll make a difference for whatever, bad things you're trying to do out there. You can go from good to great, which is, Venril was able to take full advantage of that book, and it propelled his way to success, essentially.
Right. So that was like key in him basically conquering the other tribes and forcing them to unite, right?
Yeah. Yeah. Basically just show them the book and they're like, okay, cool. Yeah, we're going to join you. Of course, it was much more violent than that, I'm sure.
Right.
But yes, he was bringing some heat to these other tribes. And so they really didn't have much choice but to get assimilated into the Kunzar tribe, which of course, evolves into the empire. But yeah.
So how does that work? How does he go from now I've united the tribes to establishing the I think it's the beginning of the Sebelesian Empire, right?
Yeah, basically, yeah, it is. So you have Terrassus, which was, I believe it was the original capital city of the forming Sebelesian Empire. And so eventually, after the tribes are assimilated and working together as one, and then you got to figure out, where we're going to have the space of operations. And so that's where Sebelus comes into play, which I feel like, and I don't know if you've come across anything that can validate this, but it almost seemed like Sebelus was around. It was just kind of like a city that was, on the up and coming fronts of just the recovering Iksar effort. But it wasn't, nothing really special. And then it almost seemed like Venril stepped in and accelerated its growth and really established it as the capital city. And then that was that. But I couldn't tell if it was a Venril building it, that was established with him, or if it was something that was already existed. And it was just something that, grew from just his efforts.
Yeah, I don't know. It makes sense that like they would just kind of move into a lot of the Shissar. The Shissar, not even ruins, right? Because the Green Mist just killed the Shissar and kind of left everything else intact. So it makes sense that they would sort of move into those things, with the exception of Chelsith, or was the capital city of the Shissar was Chelsith, right?
Chelsith, that's correct.
Yeah. They I guess they can't really too much move into that temple, right? But what was the original name of the Howling Stones? Was that Chelsith?
That's
too?
Terrassus.
Terrassus. We need too many CH things here. Yeah. So I would guess, Sebelus might have been originally a Shissar thing. And you know what? Here's some food for thought. Yeah. There's a golem in Shra Temple called the Blood of Straja, and you kill it to activate the Emperor raid encounter. Okay. The plot version of what's happening there is like the Emperor is traveling through the planes mentally. He's like projecting. Yeah. And when that golem dies, the golem is made of his blood. It alerts him to a threat or his need to come back. And then he comes back and sees you and he's like, oh, let's get it. You know what I mean? But the golem uses the same model as the Juggernaut in Sebelus, including having the same symbols around its arms and stuff. Yeah. So it makes me almost wonder if the Iksar literally just inherited the Juggernauts, the race of golems, which were previously already created by the Shissar.
I believe that. Yeah. I feel like that's sound. That's a sound connection, because I don't think I came across any direct reference of really where the golems came from, and so I think that does seem sound for sure.
They never mention it. Like you never hear like, oh, Atrebe, then after he made the Sokka card, he made the golems, right? There's no one ever mentions it, so it is kind of weird. And I know there's a whole video game thing where you're just like, well, they just wanted to reuse assets, save a few dollars. But like for me,
no.
Once it's in game, we have to take it as like, you know what I mean, in universe terms.
Yeah, I totally agree with you. And it's funny because like I feel like EverQuest, and at least in our minds, like there's a story to everything. At least there's intended to be a story for everything. Yeah. And so, there's no such thing as coincidences in EverQuest.
Never. Yeah. And we'll fill in the blanks if we have to.
Exactly. Yeah. We'll sort through that.
All right. So they established Sebelus, and then he's got a wife.
Yeah. Old Drusilla Sathir of the Obulus tribe, which funnily enough is, the way I understand it, is Obulus is a tribe of wizards, which is a dark art. for the Iksars. But anyway, yeah, her and Venril meet and get along, decide that they both want to conquer the continent of Kunark together, and they consummate the marriage and have themselves a child named Ryle. And things are going pretty well for the family, the Sathir family, for a bit. And, think time goes on, and eventually Venril starts to get a little nervous. He's getting older, and I'm not even sure what the average age of an Iksar is, but it's quite a bit. I want to say it's longer than a human life by a long shot.
Yeah. Poor humans.
I know, yeah.
Like 30 years. Hey, you're getting kind of old, dude.
You're right. Yeah, you got Venril who's, pushing 200 maybe. Don't quote me on that. But, he starts to think about, the retirement plan and what that looks like. And
was
it's not looking too good.
Was Drusilla already dead?
No.
Okay.
No. Not.
Does she outlive him, or no? She can't. Right? She does.
No, excuse me. Nope. Let me back up. Sorry. She dies. She dies before Venril. Yep.
Okay.
And that's what really sets Venril off, because he was hoping for both of them to go into immortality together, and so she dies. Which I don't know. I don't recall what her cause of death was.
It's probably just. I don't remember any dramatic. Probably just age.
Yeah, I think it was just probably age. But so Venril was already trying to figure out how to be immortal with him and his wife, so they could conquer forever. And so she dies. She dies prematurely. And so that kind of.
It's interesting that her death was so critical to him. You know what I mean? And you mentioned she was from the Obulus tribe. I didn't know she was Obulus, but there's only one item that jumps out at me from like that uses the name Obulus, right? The Obulus death shroud.
Right.
So it's just like, and later on they add a focus effect to it called mana preservation. And just like, you think about like her essence was preserved in the Howling Stones.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know.
Yeah. There's something there, man.
Yeah.
But so that's kind of where things headed for Venril, was that he was obsessed with trying to be immortal, and well, that drew the attention of his son eventually. He was a big fan of that, but
so he was trying to become a lich, right?
Essentially, yeah.
Yeah, and then did he do it wrong, or did Ryle like intervene in the ritual?
Yeah, so Ryle caught wind of his dad's efforts for a bit early into it, and didn't really know how to deal with that. And I think he did seek counsel from some of his close friends, warlords, whatever people he would eventually be conquering the continent himself with. And so he was trying to figure out how do I approach my dad about this? And well, it turns out the best way for him to approach his dad about this was to disrupt the ritual that was. That Venril had worked so hard to pull together, and so that got disrupted, and that ruined everything, because that ended up killing Venril. Killed his dad. Little dad killing there.
I mean, if you're the prince, an immortal king is bad news for you.
That's bad news. Your future's not looking too bright. That's for sure. So Ryle, I think he realized that something needed to happen. So he did that, and that's when Ryle's story starts to really take off, because again, it's like every emperor, the theme of ever since the Shissar, we were talking about it earlier. It's just ironic how it's this vicious cycle of just repeating the same thing over and over. And so Ryle, every emperor that we go through here for the Sathirian dynasty, they are just that much more refined in their aggression, that much more brutal, that much more, just evil. And so Ryle picks up right where Venril left off.
Yeah. Doesn't Ryle become like a big naval commander for the Iksar? They start actually like going around, like exploring outside of Kunark even, right?
Yeah. Yep. Because he was definitely the admiral of the family. And so he was all about what we know as Timor's Deep and beyond, actually. Ryle was terrorizing the seas, basically, and pretty effective at it. And so, I think this is where we start to see the Ring of Scale start to pay attention to what Ryle is doing, just all over the place. And so, and I want to say, gosh, I don't want to make this up, but golly, I'm top of the dome. But I want to say that Ryle had encountered I don't know if it was the gnomes. I could be making that up. I think Ryle encountered some other races out there, but I don't know if I have the lore to back that up. I have to check my notes on that one.
I think he did. I remember reading about an Iksar expedition that went to Fadewar and tried to take over Fadewar, but there was a massive storm, sank the whole fleet, and so they never really got the chance.
Yeah, that's ringing a bell. So
it's probably something like that. But there's so much like canon, non-canon stuff. It's hard to keep it all straight.
It really is, man. Yeah, it really is. But yeah, so I think with Ryle though, like I was saying, this is where I think the Ring of Scale starts to make their presence known because they start to pay attention to what Ryle's doing.
Yeah, and
this, of course, this creates conflict within the Ring of Scale because, similar to like the Relosian Empire many years ago, where they're just like, yeah, maybe we should just leave him alone. Let's not wake the sleeping Iksar type of thing, or the Shissar in the other case. But yeah, and Trachanon wasn't really a big fan of that idea. And Trachanon was a young dragon at this point in time, and he had that teenage angst, so to speak, where he was like, I'm actually gonna go do my own thing and put matters in my own hands. I'm going to deal with this Iksar threat. And so that's when Ryle and Trachanon meet for the first time out in the seas, and it's not pretty.
Yeah, he sinks the fleet, right?
He sinks the fleet with Ryle included.
If you had to fight a dragon anywhere, you being on a boat on the ocean, definitely bottom of my pick, right?
That's bad luck. That's bad luck for sure.
Like the floor is lava.
Yes, that's right. Yeah.
I'm thinking about it from like the Ring of Scale perspective. I think like Venril Sathir, his big focus during his lifetime was like uniting all the tribes, right? And then Ryle, he's where it gets bad for them because he basically conquers the continent of Kunark, right? Like he established Karnor's castle so they could fight the giants and stuff like that. At this point, like the Froglocks are enslaved. I don't think any other big races even exist, right? Like the Sarnak haven't been made yet. And the lycanthropes, the Drolvarg, don't exist yet. So it's really just Froglocks and giants. And he's got that pretty much locked down. So he's like fighting with like Warslick and stuff. Or I don't even know if Warslick was around just yet because he kind of came at the end days or something. But they were definitely becoming like a global threat kind of issue for the Ring of Scale.
They were, yeah. And just to kind of like throw out some Kunark celebrity names out there, but Kern was a warlord. I think Kern was actually around towards the end of Venril's life, and then he was still around. So Kern was one of Ryle's warlords, and I mean they were on a roll. It was Kern. I think you mentioned Warslick. There's ringing a bell, like it's like Caractus or something like that. Like I don't even know. I don't know if that one shows up later down the road in a different another expansion. And then there was a vampire as well. that I'm suddenly remembering.
Zalgaz.
So Zalgaz comes later. There is one before. Yeah,
it's basically when Venril Sathir comes back. All those. Spoiler alert! If you're going to watch the rest of the video, we're going to spoil a future event. You know how the Sarnak accidentally resurrect Venril Sathir, or not really resurrect, but they, put his spirit in another body. Mm-hmm. When he comes back, the first thing he does is kill all the Sarnak except for one, and that last one he turns into Zalgaz.
Zalgaz, that's right. Yep. And we know, what Zalgaz's fate is. He's in the library of Kaysora, holding it down. But more on that later, perhaps.
Yeah.
But Chosuth is, I think, was the third warlord. So anyway, the big one was Kern, because that's where the lore kind of connects there. Kern's Tower, Kern the Torturer, Kern the Executioner, so on and so forth.
Is there a connection between Kern and the dude from the other dungeon, just one zone away? I'm forgetting the name and it's killing me. Really challenging dungeon in the forest right off of Field of Bone.
Crypt of Downir.
Crypt of Downir, yeah. Is there something with Hagglebaron, Downir, and Kern, and like enchanters being banned? He wants a magical dagger made.
Yes. Yes, there is. I'm trying to remember because that's exactly right. Yeah, there was a almost like a commission that was being asked of by Kern for like a enchanted dagger or something like that. Yeah, yeah,
Yeah.
You think I'd be pretty proficient with that because I did cover Kern's Tower to an extent, but
I should have watched the video before this.
yes, I should have watched my own video. But there's definitely some overlap there with.
Well, you
with
mentioned
down
earlier
there.
the wizard being a dark art for the Iksar. If people
Mm-hmm.
don't know, every school of magic except for shamanism and necromancy was banned in Iksar society.
Yep.
So like no
Didn't mean you
clerics
couldn't
allowed.
do it, but yeah, it was banned.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yep.
Like you would get killed if you were caught practicing magic, like enchanter stuff or wizard stuff.
Yep. Which is unfortunate because I really feel like, an Iksar enchanter. I mean, shoot, Iksar anything would have been pretty cool. Anything that we already
It's
have.
good for us, man. If they didn't outlaw it, we'd be playing Iksar Quest.
we really would be.
Yeah.
Oh, man. But yeah, I think I'm trying to think of what else Ryle was about. I mean, I think that was basically Ryle's life. He was all about the empire building. He did his job. If the job was to expand the empire and really just get a good grip of everything that's on your continent. And there really weren't any. Part of me wants to say like those who opposed the Iksar, that they were going to be in bad shape, but you didn't really oppose the Iksar. You just were in the way of the Iksar, and you just didn't want to be on the receiving end of that domination. And so, yeah, the poor froglocks and giants and anything else. Yeah.
I don't know that he really faced any formidable organized resistance. Like giants are a problem just because they're giant. But other than that, so after Ryle dies, he's got a son, Atrebe.
A Trebe. I say a Trebe, but yeah, I've heard it a couple different ways. Yeah. So a Trebe. So you had Ryle the admiral, and then you have a Trebe who's was just the one that was in his laboratory all the time, studying, experimenting, and just getting real creative with those experiments. We mentioned the Sarnax and the Sokakar. Almost any, I would imagine that 99% of the folks listening to your podcast knows what a Sarnak is.
Sokakar less so.
Yes, definitely. Sarnax introduced pretty early in. Sokakars much later. I think it was Seeds of Destruction. That was the first time, maybe.
Yeah, I think that's when you see one in game because you go back in time and you watch the battle between Ganak and Jaladar, and you see Ganak kind of inconveniently flying above your head. You have to like look up, and he's flying on a Sokakar mount.
Yeah.
I wonder why we never saw them during Kunark, because they do mention it even in that old lore.
Yep.
But yeah, take it away with those two races.
Yeah. So Sarnax. Oh gosh. So Dragon and Iksar were melded together to create the Sarnak, and that was basically. I mean, gosh, you just really can't get much more efficient than producing your own labor, army. That's all in-house stuff for the Iksar at this point. So. They mass produce a ton of Sarnax, and
basically built a slave race.
Yeah, that's basically what happened. And that story, the Sarnax story, of course, does evolve. We don't got to get into that necessarily, but they set up shop in what is known as Chardok eventually, and by they I mean like that was kind of like a base of operations for the Iksar army at first, and that evolves into something else over time. But then, the Sokakar, which was Dragon and Froglock,
I think so. Basically, a flying bizarre mount.
Yeah, Trebe just again, he was super creative of the things that he was doing, and so, but those were the two that made it out, and certainly left their impression on just being an effective tool for the Iksar Empire, for the Sebalisian Empire, to just continue to expand and dominate others out there.
Do you think the Sarnak are our first godless race?
I think so. I really do.
Like, we never see anything about them worshiping anything either. So they didn't adopt a god later. Like, they're just their own thing.
Yeah, and one of the things I wanted to check, and this was back when I was originally neck deep into Kunark lore, but was like the EQ2 Sarnax and their story of how they came to existence and who they were worshiping, because I was very curious about that same exact thing, how every Norathian race has a god that created them. But the Sardak was like, well, that's not quite the case. Unless by Kazakh by proxy, but I don't think so.
Yeah, I don't think so. If anything, I would wonder if they would maybe worship Vishan. You know what I mean? But we just haven't seen any evidence of them worshiping anything.
Yeah,
at least not in EQ1.
Right.
Yeah. So we have these races that he created: the Sokokar, the Sarnak. He maybe had the biggest impact on Kunark of all the people, even though he's kind of low key.
Yeah.
How did Atrebe die?
So yeah, there's his death is it's shrouded in mystery, because it's secondhand information for one, and yeah, there doesn't seem to be really any evidence. And so again, at the beginning we started talking about Atrebe. He's all about living in his laboratory, experimenting and all that. Well, allegedly, it got the better of him because one of his experiments ended up causing some sort of explosion, and again, allegedly killed him. So there's no body recovered. There's, again, nobody really knows if that's for certain. So there's a lot of speculation about how Atrebe died and whether he did or not. So we may never know.
Do you think he died? Maybe he used teleportation magic on accident.
I think he got out of it. So yeah, I'm thinking he was able to escape and continue his experimenting later down the road.
You know how they have like gate potions and like field of bone potions and stuff in game?
Oh yeah.
For a long time, those potions, I just thought like drinking them magically transported you. But I was reading like GM event lore, and the GM event characters will frequently have potions that they smash on the ground, and then in a puff of smoke, they vanish.
Okay. Yeah.
And I'm thinking like, oh, that's probably what we're actually doing when you use like a filter of major translocation or whatever. You just you're smashing that on the ground. And it just opens up a gate for you, right? And it almost sounds like that could be something like maybe Atrebe just like poofed himself somewhere unknown.
I'd have to think that Atrebe was prepared for a laboratory explosion. I mean, right? I'd have to think.
Yeah.
But yeah, Atrebe. I think the only other thing that I'll mention about Atrebe, despite his mysterious death, is his impact was not insignificant. He was actually able to put a little pressure on the Ring of Scale, and so there was that's actually the conflict had evolved to that point where Atrebe was able to, with his army of Sokokar, which we have no classic reference to those outside of just the name, and his Sarnak, they were able to basically push the dragons back to their home, their headquarters, which was Vishan's Peak.
Yeah, I mean that's a significant power jump, right? Like just huge. Boom, here's like 1,000 extra dudes I just made.
Yeah. Let's go.
Like now we can fly. By the way, right. Like there's no escaping them. Advantage. So yeah. So he dies. Then his son takes over, and we don't know, outside of Venril, we don't know anything about any of their families, like their wives or like if they had other children, right?
Right. Yeah. Drusilla, she left her mark. But really, yeah, the other empresses, if you will, they weren't really significant from a lore perspective, as far as we know.
But do Iksar hatch, or are they born?
They hatch.
Okay, because like one of the things was they destroyed the hatchery for the Iksar, right?
Exactly. Okay.
Anyway, I don't want to divert it, but it was so Atrebe's son takes over. Who is that?
So that's Ganak. So we have the Admiral Ryle. I mean, Venril was like an all rounder, so he's pretty good at everything. Yeah, we have Ryle, the Admiral. We have Atrebe, the scientist, if you will, and then we have Ganak, who's just like the warrior. That dude's just he's gritty and efficient and just a strategist from a youth. He's just very effective
that warlord.
Leader. That warlord, yeah. And so Ganak is very prominent figure in this story because he is coming into the state of this timeline where the Iksar and Ring of Scale conflict is at a fever pitch. Like it is at the peak. I mean, there's been hundreds and hundreds of years of this conflict, and it's been kind of back and forth for the most part. The tree makes a big push, and now Ganak's like, it's time to finish the job. And so Ganak's like, he's the lead Iksar. And then you have, eventually, and we can talk a little bit more about this in a second. But I just want to stress the fact that like Ganak was an incredibly smart emperor, one of the best, some would say.
And he takes over basically in the time of like full blown warfare, right?
Full blown, yep.
Yeah,
it is intense.
Before that, for like hundreds of years, it was kind of like simmering hostilities, like like little touches here and there. But here it's like armies and clashes, and
Yep, that's right. And so I always love the imagery of this because it's one of my favorite parts of the Kunark lore is just the what the Field of Bone once was and how it became the Field of Bone. And so you have what was Kabbalah still existed. I think it may not. It certainly wasn't what it was, and as it eventually became. But you had the Seleucid Empire was massive, so you had little cities and stuff like that. And the Field of Bone wasn't the Field of Bone. It was like this plains where they'd hang out, they'd farm, and it was just a nice little pasture there. Well, this was the site of one of the most epic battles. And I'd say in classic EverQuest for sure, if not everything pre-Plains of Power. This is a huge battle between Ganak and the leader of the Ring of Scale out in this Field of Bone.
It's definitely the biggest battle that we get like detail on.
Yeah,
and that we don't participate in. You know what I mean?
Sadly,
it's crazy to think of like the Field of Scale and what it becomes the Field of Bone. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So do you want to talk about the battle there?
Yeah, and you can certainly expand on it because I'm gonna capture a few details, but certainly not all of them. But so you have the face-off between Ganak and Jalad Dar. Jalad Dar is the leader of the Ring of Scale, and so their paths inevitably converge in the Field of Bone, and it is a grand battle. You have the Iksars with their Sokakar, their Sarnax. Of course, you have the Ring of Scale with their dragons, and they face off. And it's other than it being an absolute just wild battle, like it was a wild battle. I'm trying to think so I think it was Jalad Dar that ended up casting a spell or something. He casted a spell and it basically exploded everything. And that was curtains for the entire both sides. Like everybody just got oofed at that point. Sorry, I feel like I'm talking to my children with that oofed.
It's just crazy to imagine Emperor Ganak and Jalad Dar like clashing in the skies above the Field of Scale. Wild. And then obviously Jalad Dar was losing, right? You don't unleash that kind of attack unless it's like a last resort thing. So I would assume that he was going to lose, and he unleashes this terrible magical energy, and boom, everything is reduced to bone. Everybody is killed. So huge loss for like the main body of the Iksar Empire gone, making them super vulnerable. And now even to this day, the bones of Jalad Dar sit in the center of the Field of Bone.
That's right. So for anyone who didn't know that, that's the Field of Bone, that big old dragon that was once the leader of the Ring of Scale, the father of Faradar, if I'm not mistaken.
This event inadvertently leads to the waking of the sleeper.
Oh, really?
So Emperor Ganak is the guy, you meet his ghost, right? In Trakenon's Teeth.
Yeah.
He gives you the key to enter Sebelis. And then he also gives you the key to enter Vishan's Peak.
Oh, okay.
So he's like, get revenge, kill Trakenon for us. And spoiler alert. And he gives you the key to the peak. So then the players, the lesser races go into the peak and they kill everything there. And in Velius, you explore Dragon Necropolis and you find the shade of Jalad Dar. And he says, hey, there's this tomb where there's a dragon, and he will give you all these riches if you go help him out. I can make you a key. but you have to bring me a talisman from one of the first brood dragons, the first dragons to ever hatch after Vishan arrived. And he looks at you and he says, it's not so unlike how you entered Vishan's peak before you came here. So Jaladar knows that you killed his daughter. And he sends you into Sleeper's tomb to wake the sleeper, knowing what's really going to happen. And that whole chain of events is kind of set into motion because of basically Ganak's undying hatred for the dragons.
Yeah. See, look at that. Kunark Lord, the foundation of just of everything. The sleeper.
Those early expansions, the early eras of EverQuest, you really get that sense that they had the full story fleshed out before they started. You know what I mean? And everything is deeply interwoven and connected. Later on, they're like, okay, we're just going to slap another thing onto this layer. I mean, you can't blame them, right?
No, for sure.
But yeah, it felt like up through Luckland to me felt very connected. Velius obviously super up to that ultra connected. I think a lot of Luckland they had mapped out too. Plains of Power, maybe. Yeah. After that, it's totally out the window.
Yeah, totally. But yeah, that was that. So that put the Iksar. So Ganak and we'll focus, of course, on the Iksar. Ganak and his death. That put the Iksars in a very interesting, vulnerable situation. The war wasn't.
The thing to point out here is like the time from Atrebe to Ganak's death was not very long, right?
No, not long at all. Shoot,
so put them in a bad spot.
It did, yeah. Because again, like you were saying earlier, I mean, there was just a bunch of these skirmishes that were happening, and it was just constant pressure from both sides. And then for to lose such a significant portion of your army in just seconds, relatively speaking, yeah, not good. Left the Iksars pretty defenseless.
Yeah,
and there are certain races that were that had been formerly enslaved that they were just waiting around for there to be a moment for them to jump. And I'm talking about
everyone is just waiting to see that opening, right?
Oh yeah, the giants, frog logs, like everyone that was enslaved, they're like, okay.
Yeah, the Iksar are starting to look at their Shissar moment on the horizon. So
exactly.
Who takes over after Ganak?
So that would be there were a bunch of heirs to the throne, but Chatal, I believe, was the only one who was appropriately aged to take the throne. And so, and poor Chatal's like, or how I say Chatal, but I think it's Chatal. Like, I don't know why I feel like there's a French, like, little sounding Chatal. Right. Just bear with me when I say his name. I know it might be a little cringy.
As long as we don't say Iskar, I'm good.
Yeah, we'd have to end the podcast.
Right.
And so Chatal or Chatal, the dude was not prepared. Even if it was like a natural progression from Ganak to Chatal, he just wasn't. He lacked that Iksar spirit, that conqueror's, empire building, ruthless spirit that his ancestors had from birth, essentially. And so they not only caught the empire off guard, but they certainly caught Chatal off guard, because he had to put himself in a position to where he had to step up and try to like figure out what to do. And well, I mean, yeah, it didn't bode well for him. Needless to say, he you have dragons chomping at the bit, you have frog logs revolting, you have giants taking back territories wherever they can, and then you have the key dragon figure Trachanon, he's just been, oh boy, this is just a long time in the making, and he sees his chance to strike, and so he makes a move. And Chatal, he tried to prepare, he tried to have his armies bolstered, defend Sebelis, because that was really the last remaining just stronghold for the Iksars at the time. Like every other city at the time had gone through civil unrest, and it was just bad. Like the cities were fallen, and
Karnors had fallen at that point by the giants.
Yep. golly, I can't think of the actual name, but City of Mist. Why can't I think of the name? Torsus. So Torsus. Yep. That was falling, or if it may have already fallen by that point. So yeah. So all that to say is that Shittal, the cards that he had been dealt in this situation weren't really good, not in his favor.
And Trakenon was one of the dragons who was most aggressive the whole time, right? Like he was one of the first guys who wanted to take a direct offensive action against the Iksar
since day one, and he held that grudge to the very end.
He sort of like forced, because the Ring of Scale, despite their origins, like they came over to Kunark and left the Claws of Vishan because they wanted to have a more direct hand with mortals. They sort of resisted that call for a while. Jaladar didn't want them to fight the Iksar, and Trakenon and one other dragon whose name I forget forced Jaladar and the Ring of Scale's hand by sinking Ryle's ship. That's when it was like the point of no return, right?
Exactly.
And then we don't really hear Trakenon doing much. He is probably put on ice a little bit until Jaladar is literally dead. And now it's like revenge time, right? That's where we see Track come back.
Track comes back, and with a vengeance for sure. So yeah, he makes his way to Sebelis, and the remaining forces, Ring of Scale forces that he was able to muster up, they came through and they obliterated Sebelis. So Shittal was posted up trying to whatever. Just I think he ended up getting killed in the hatchery of all places. I think that was where, or at least that's where his throne room, or wherever he was stationed, or wherever he was when he got killed. It happened to be, it was near the hatchery, or it may not even matter. I think it wouldn't have mattered. Everything was obliterated anyway. But Shittal, that's why we see the ghost of Shittal down there in Sebelis, because he didn't make it.
Yeah,
he got killed, and all the hatchlings got killed.
So the whole royal line just snuffed out, gone,
done. That's it. No more Sathirs. Now, fun while it lasted.
As a result of this is when the Froglocks were officially freed, basically.
Yeah.
And it's why they worship Trakenon and, to an extent, Vishan. The Kunark Froglocks worship Trakenon and Vishan because Trakenon liberated them. Yeah. And Vishan, of course, being the god of the dragons. So they make their little outpost in the swamp, and then a lot of them stay in Sebelis to continue serving Trakenon, who Trakenon is not technically undead when we see him in game, right? He's just not in good shape.
He's not in good shape, yeah. And I'm not entirely sure why exactly that is, but yeah, he's not undead quite yet.
There's an event you can play much later in EverQuest called Fall of an Empire, where you play as Trakenon and the other dragons that he brought with him, and you fight the last remaining Iksar as they defend Sebelis. And it was unbeaten for like 10 years.
No joke.
Yeah, it was. It wasn't required for progression, so people just were like, okay, well, that was really hard and sucks. Let's not do it. But yeah, I think Frank and Bobby Bick are part of the first group of people to ever beat it. And it is incredibly challenging, is my understanding.
There has to be. Tell me I'm sure there is, but I'll ask the question anyway. I mean, is there a YouTube video about this?
There might be a Twitch clip from Bobby. I'd have to go back and send it to you after we're done here and see it. But it's crazy. And you play with their old models and stuff.
That's cool.
But it was really tough because you just fight army after army of these Iksars, and there's a council that you have to battle and stuff like that.
Dang, I missed out, man.
Yeah. So that was that, and after that, do you know how long the Iksar are kind of in a state of kind of chaos before they merge back up in the ruins that became Cabalus? After this, they go to the Emerald Circle. They're like, no more royal family. Now we have this noble circle that leads the city, right?
Yeah, so you kind of have another that's exactly what happens. And the Emerald Circle, I think that was probably about I can confirm this later, but I want to say it was about 200 years, rounding up, where the Emerald Circle was able to step in, and they did a great job. They were actually able to get the Iksars back on track. They restored trade. They they were able to rebuild cities and all sorts of things. And they did a great job. But then they fell into the same trap of kind of how this whole story began. At least with Venril was, they had different. I don't think there were tribes. I think there were states, and but they were based on the ancient tribes, and so you had that whole situation where they start to fragment a little bit and actually work in the opposite direction as what the Emerald Circle was intending to accomplish and intending to avoid. Actually, was to fragment and then go back into unrest and civil war. But anyway,
yeah,
about 200 years is when the Emerald Circle was able to kind of get things back in order for a little bit.
And then shortly after this, basically, is when the Sarnak discover the body of Ryle Sathir is what they discover, and it is with what remains exist of Venril Sathir, which was just, I guess, his what is it called? The thing that a lich has.
The phylactery.
Yeah, it was with the phylactery of Venril, and
or was
messing around trying to take these items. They inadvertently complete the ritual, and Venril's soul, his spirit, jumps into the nearest body, the body of his son, Ryle Sathir. So that's when we see Venril Sathir in game, we're actually looking at Ryle's body piloted by Venril.
Yep.
So Venril kills them all except for one, makes that one his first new servant, Zalgaz. Sends him to Kaesora to do his thing there. Mm-hmm. And then he immediately goes back to Karnor's castle and starts rebuilding his armies. But the Ring of Scale is like, not again. Like, they recognize what's happening. So they reach out through spies, because the Ring of Scale has built spies into like all the societies on Kunark. And one of the things they do is like they're really big on taking they're like classic D&D fantasy dragons, where like they could take the form of other things, so you don't know it's a dragon.
Right.
That's what the Ring of Scale does in this era, and they infiltrate the giants and the froglocks, and they encourage them to attack Karnor's castle. And then the giants reach out to the goblins of Kunark and ask them to come in and join this alliance too. They call it the Alliance of Stone. And the goblins are like, nah. They're like, well, we'll give you this mine, the best mine in all of Kunark. It, obviously it's what we know of now as the Mines of Nurga. It had a different name at the time, but the goblins are like, okay, in exchange for that mine, we'll join the alliance. And they all attack Karnor's and Venril Sathir. Now, Venril had like recruited some Iksar wizard, oddly enough, to help him, and they created the Drollvarg, the lycanthropes.
Yeah,
we don't know the exact origin of the Drollvarg, like what race they were before. Part of me thinks that it was like the High Elves, because the High Elves, remember the High Elves like tried to come to Kunark like 3 times. The third time was when they established FV.
Yeah.
But like 2 times they failed. And I am sort of thinking that maybe they grabbed up some of those High Elves, and that was the basis of creating the Drollvarg.
That's interesting. And could be.
But nevertheless, the emeralds, or sorry, the Ring of Scale convinces his ally who created the Drollvarg to betray him. The name was Thuga.
Thuga the wizard.
Yeah, the Alliance
serpent changer, right? He was an Iksar serpent changer. Yeah.
Yeah. You know what's weird about that? The name is really like non-conventional for Iksar.
Yeah, you're right. Yeah.
Thuga sounds more like it would be like an ogre.
Yeah, exactly.
So all of these things come at Venril at the same time, pretty much, and he gets blown out, loses. He flees to an area that we never see in game, but is mentioned in the EQ design document. He flees to an area called the Bile, where he's got a fortress called Varys, and he stays there for 100 or 200 years.
Okay.
Then comes back to Karnor's castle when the coast is kind of cleared. And he focuses on building up his power much more slowly now, so as not to be easily detected. But we know the Ring of Scale is watching him, because Gornair's mission in the Dreadlands is to keep tabs on on Venril's forces and his movements.
Yeah, so the design docs you're talking about, the bile, if we were to speculate on where this might be located,
isn't there an area in Kunark called like the Dragon's Drool? Like one of those areas that appears on the map, but you don't see it in game.
Dang, I'd have to pull
there's
the
Dragon's
map,
Drool
really
is a lake between Swamp of No Hope and the Emerald Jungle.
Okay.
And I would guess the bile would be somewhere over there. And like, where is Karnor's castle relative to this? It's like across the river that is the Lake of Ill Omen.
Yeah.
So Dreadlands is kind of like, Karnor's here is in the southwest, and I think Fort Varys in the bile is like the southeast of the continent.
Dang, that's some lore. I haven't heard that before. It's fascinating.
I've never heard anything else about it. When I Googled it, this was the only thing I found about it. It was like, oh yeah, he went back there, and that was it. Never mentioned again. So,
oh man.
But yeah, the Ring of Scale has people basically strategically placed. Like Talendor is in Skyfire to guard against potential invasions. Right, he's like the sentry watching for threats to the peak. Severilis is watching the Iksar. He's over there in Emerald Jungle, not too far from Cabalus, and also sort of near Sebelis. So he's like in between. And Gornair keeping an eye on Venril Sathir. And then we have the Drachnid. And we got to talk a little bit about Mayong, because Mayong and the Ring of Scale are like the original beef in EQ.
Right. And the way I understood it, and correct me if I'm wrong, was it was kind of a similar situation with Mayong and the Drachnids to like kind of keep tabs on the dragons to an extent.
Yeah, Mayong Mayong was doing that like everywhere. He was keeping spies all over the place to try to keep tabs on any immortal power he was trying to keep an eye on, because Mayong was also like he was already immortal and he was seeking apotheosis. We don't know that at the time, but so like he's keeping an eye on the dragons because they're his huge power rival, and he's also keeping an eye on Venril Sathir because he's a lich. Yeah. So Mayong's definitely deep in that. And during Classic, I'm going to ruin a future video series just a little bit here, but during Classic, Mayong has a bunch of battles with the Ring of Scale in the form of GM events. We uncovered some of them, and there's literally a battle where Mayong tracks down 3 dragons from the Ring of Scale in the Wrath Mountains and kills them. Dang. And when they were trying to basically like rend the veil that Vishan had created between the Plane of Sky and Norath, which that veil had caused the dragons to be weakened from their true, peak potential power. Yeah. That was like their mission. So that's like a whole hour-long thing for another day.
For sure.
Mayong is definitely watching here. I don't think we ever saw significant events from him on the continent once it came out, because there was already just so much going on there.
Right.
But yeah. Now, I think we need to touch about like the players. When we got introduced to Kunark, the message that came out with Kunark was like, hey, the League of Antonica Bards is announcing that they've established a path to the new High Elven outpost called Verona Vi. And they're like, oh, and don't get on the wrong boat. If you get on this wrong boat, you'll go to the over there and you'll get killed unless you're evil. So
don't make that mistake. Like
what happened was like 50 years before the start of the game, Verona Vi was born. Maybe it's even more than 50 years, but she was born. Now, we don't have to go into her whole plot line, but she's the chosen of Tunair, and she's like semi-divine. And her whole purpose was to restore balance, because the battles of good and evil were causing things to become unbalanced all throughout Norath. The High Elves were becoming corrupt because they started dwelling in cities and thought that they were better than the other elves. So Verona Vi's mission was to establish balance. She was raised outside of Felwith, not knowing she was royalty or anything. So Tunair gave her the task, once she became old enough, of going out and exploring the whole world so she could become worldly and understand the true nature of balance. She eventually goes to Kunark by herself, with a party of adventurers, with like Alcabor and some other big names in it. And while they're there, they discover the Ring of Scale. And the Ring of Scale tells Verona Vi and her group of companions that they can bring balance back to Norath, but they would only do so in exchange for some of her memories. And Verona Vi is thinking like, okay, I'll tell you some information you want, but she agrees to it, and they delete a huge chunk of memories from everybody in the party. And Verona Vi's whole party gets separated. She ends up back in Fadeware, but she knows that something was lost. And after a period of time, she I forget exactly how she did it, but she ends up talking to Tunair again, and she says, "Hey, I'm trying to she met Galeth Verdith, and he raised her, so that's where they're like, oh, something's wrong, right?"
Yeah.
So she talks to Tunair again. They summon Tunair, and Tunair's like, "Hey, I can help you regain your memories." She conjures an item, the life guide, the scepter that we see on the box art. She gives it to Verona Vi, and she says, "This will help you slowly regain your memories, find all your companions, and bring back their memories too, and you'll all have your memories regained." So they do that. They go all over Norath doing their adventures, and then they're like, they finally have the whole party, and they're like, okay, we need to go to Kunark and handle some business with the Ring of Scale.
Yeah.
During this time, Venril Sathir finds out that the Ring of Scale did this, and he comes up with his own plan. He's like, okay, if they could steal people's memories, I want to have that ability too. Imagine all the memories I could steal, and I could become like all knowing. So he's got a servant called Ganak Dorantath, which is the Iksar on the box art. A lot of people, you've probably run into this. A lot of people think the dude on the box art for Kunark is Venril Sathir.
Right. That's not the case.
So they go back, the whole adventuring party of like the most elite. This is like the SEAL Team 6, the Delta Force of Norathians, right? It's got like Galeth, Verdith, Serjevic, Driesel Pocket Dip, Lyrii, Oakwint, and Alcabor in it. And they get in a fight where they're surrounded by all these Drolvargs. And they defeat them, but while they're fighting them, 2 Iksar roll up and help them out. And they've never seen an Iksar before, so like, oh, hey, what's up? You know what I mean? And they're like, hey, we're trying to find these dragons. And one of the Iksars is like, hey, I have a map, and the dragons are up here.
Yeah,
it's really far away. It would take you a long time to go from here all the way to Skyfire, where Vishan's Peak is. But I can help you teleport there.
Yeah, I got you. Yeah.
And he grabs Verona Vi's arm, throws down the potion, and jumps through the teleport.
Boom, kidnapped.
Right. So then he's got the life guide, and he's trying to get that to Venril Sathir. And there's all these plans, but I think he sort of betrays Venril because the stuff never gets to Venril. He keeps it, and he goes to the area outside the city of Mist. Okay. And for some reason, what Galeth Verdith does, he sails all the way back to Fadeware, reports her kidnapping to the king, and then the king strips him of his knighthood, says, go back to Kunark, establish an outpost, and with armies, bring her back in 2 years, or else you're dead.
Yeah, yeah.
So then he sails all the way back to Kunark.
Tirith Thex, right?
Yeah, King Tirith Thex.
Yeah.
So then he sails all the way back to Kunark again. Like, it seems to me, I would have just been like, okay, we better go find her. I'm not going back to Fadeware. It's like a treacherous voyage.
Yeah.
But they go back. They establish Verona Vi, the final outpost attempt, and that is like, boom, Kunark opens. A little bit after Kunark opens, they have the GM event. Hey, we found out where Verona Vi is. They all run. They battle Ganak and some of the other characters from the box art, the giant ogre, troll, and dark elf that you see.
Mm-hmm.
And they defeat them. They rescue Verona Vi, but then Ganak is able to escape. And the dark elf grabs the life guide, and she ports away too. And that is pretty much the plot of Kunark. That's why we get involved.
Yeah, and for good reason. It's some drama going on in Kunark once it comes out. And there's a couple things that I wasn't even aware of with just how the the events that kind of led into the kidnapping. So that's fascinating. That's like my word of the podcast. It's fascinating, because that's what
EverQuest lore is like that thing where like the more you dig, the more there's just more there.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. And you mentioned Ganak, and so there was a little tidbit there, just connecting dots from previous points of the Iksar timeline. But Ganak was part of the cult of the Arisen, and the cult of the Arisen were the Sarnax. The Sarnax that resurrected Venril were the same cult, and that cult was they were the same ones that found. And I think you alluded to this earlier, but they were the same ones who found Ryle and his belongings, and they had this long-standing history since Venril's death of just waiting and searching for a way to bring him back. And we're talking generations and generations of this cult, and then finally they succeed. In different ways, of course. You have Ganak, who has his own agenda to an extent, but being a seemingly loyal servant to Venril till he gets what he needs. But then, So anyway, it's just there's a couple of different layers and things that are happening in parallel that all leads to this. And
I never knew about the cult of the Arisen. Yeah, I thought it was just like pure happenstance.
Yeah, no, it was a cult, man. They were all over the place. And it was all to try to resurrect Venril. So,
well, it makes sense because like the Iksar generally do not want Venril Sathir to come back, right? Like he's persona non grata.
Yeah.
So you start to wonder, like, how did he have these few Iksar followers? Well, they were part of the cult. You know what I mean? So that makes a lot of sense.
Yeah, because again, the Sathir bloodlines that's been done with for a bit. So you have Vekin, who's I don't even know if he goes by Emperor, but we'll just call him Emperor Vekin, and he's the one who's running the show come Kunark launch out of Kabbaliss. And he's
the one with the Iron Tail?
Yeah.
Do you remember that story?
Yeah, vaguely, but yeah.
So he was on a voyage, the ship crashed, and he was in the Timorous Deep, and like a Trachanosaur fought him, and he killed it, but it ate his tail. When they found him again, they were so impressed by the story, they made him a big metal tail to wear, and now he's Vekin Iron Tail. Iron Tail,
exactly. Yep, that's it. So he's turned a new. Well, I'm going to say turned a new leaf. He just where the Iksars are now. Yeah, they don't want anything to do with Venril. They don't want. Yeah, they couldn't be more opposite than the Sathir bloodline was. How they were. So
yeah. I mean, I almost wonder, though, what would be more effective for them. You know what I mean?
Right. Yeah, because as it stands now, they're at least now being present back when Kunark launches. It's things still aren't really looking all that great for them.
Yeah, I mean, they're like surrounded by enemies. Like the Ring of Scale is as powerful as it's ever been.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah. You got frog locks all over the place. Drolvar's just wandering around. Like, what's going on?
Yeah. Vexar like sank into the sea.
Yeah, straight up sank. Yeah, man.
Yeah,
it's not looking good.
Yeah, it's not good. All right, Larry, this has been awesome. Do you feel like we missed anything about Kunark? I'm sure we did, but is there anything that jumps out at you?
I think no. To answer the question, no. I think we captured really the most pivotal moments throughout the timeline. All the emperors, and most importantly, I say most importantly, all of it's important. But just kind of where that story leads and how it lines up with the launch of Kunark, which I think is always is immersive. It's a very immersive thing to know everything that led up to the point where many of us who played Kunark back in the day, and some of us still today to an extent, but it's just like, wow, what a story. So hopefully this is a refresher, if not something new for many folks out there, because whether you're playing on live or you're playing on an emulated server that's about to go into Kunark, having that knowledge, I feel like it's good knowledge to have, because it's a fantastic story we're still connected the dots. So yeah, good stuff, man.
All right. Well, folks, thanks for tuning in. Larry, thank you so much for coming on the podcast. Absolute treat having you on here. I'm a huge fan of your work. I've told you a million times, so I don't need to say it too much again, but please, folks, check out Larry's content. I promise you will not regret it. And You're one of the few people who can like really get down and chat heavy about lore. So I loved having you on, Larry. Thank you very much.
No, the pleasure's all mine, man. And thank you for doing what you're doing with the podcast and beyond that, man. I really, you're doing great things. So keep it up. And I'm glad I had the pleasure of jumping on here and talking shop with you. And, hopefully, there's another lore topic we can dive deep into in the future. So I look forward to that.
Oh yeah, definitely. I'm sure there will be. We should, we should reconvene after a couple months of Lucklin on Quorum.
I'm 100% down. 100% down. Let's plan for that.
Okay.
Cool, man. Thank you.
All right, folks. This is Zaide, DramaQuest, and LevelUpLarry out.